Hi, my name is Ben England, founder and CEO of FDAimports.com and Benjamin L. England & Associates. We represent hundreds of foreign companies and U.S. importers regulated by FDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and Customs. We primarily help these companies import safe food into the United States. Now, we've recently done some videos on FDA's Food Safety Modernization Act and their proposed rules that came out in January 4, 2013 on hazards for risk-based preventive controls, HARP-C, and standards for produce safety. These are major regulations and they're major changes. But I wanted to do a special video for foreign suppliers of food and U.S. food importers because they have to look forward still to the foreign supplier verification regulations that are still due. These new proposed rules will implement the requirement for the importer to make certain the foreign supplier complies with these other substantive food safety regulations. So foreign suppliers and U.S. importers should look at our other videos, the one on HARP-C under the FSMA, the proposed rules, as well as the ones on standards for produce safety. And you'll see some details there talking about some high-level issues that you should be concerned about. But this video is really for foreign suppliers and U.S. importers. We wanted to find a way to help you start talking about these requirements so you can get together and start thinking how you're going to implement them. So again, the regulations are proposed. These are not final rules. There's going to be a comment period for 120 days that goes to about the middle of May. My expectation is that comment period will be extended. So many of these regulations affect foreign companies, and many of those foreign companies do not necessarily have someone who can interpret them and read them in English and be able to understand how they would apply. So I would expect FDA to grant an extension of time for people to comment, but don't bank on that. It could be that this FDA wants to get these regulations implemented quickly, and they just might not extend it. So it's really important to get into these proposed regulations now and try to find someone to help you to interpret them if you're having a hard time understanding what FDA is saying. That's a critical thing for foreign suppliers to consider. A second thing I wanted to point out is that FDA's Food Safety Modernization Act, the statute that has amended food safety that FDA is implementing here, had some exemptions built into the HARP-C and the standards for produce safety provisions. And one of the big exemptions related to companies that were subject to seafood or juice HACCP. Now, FDA says even in its regulations that if you're under seafood HACCP and you comply, then HARP-C doesn't apply. The reason that's not exactly true is because at the same time FDA also modified, for the first time in 40 or 50 years, its sanitation regulations for food. And if you go back to the HACCP regulations, you'll see that it reads in the sanitation regs. So when they modified the sanitation regs, they affected seafood HACCP. So this is going to affect seafood companies even though they thought they were exempt. It's critical then for you to go back and see just what FDA did. If you need help in sort of interpreting it, how you build this into your HACCP model, please let us know, but you must go back and check that because the sanitation proposed regs for food sanitation are being modified and that will affect HACCP. The other thing I wanted to point out is this qualified individual person that's necessary now under HARP-C as well as under these new sanitation proposals. With the sanitation regs, basically FDA turned a bunch of shoulds into musts. And one of those shoulds that was converted to a must was the requirement that a food company have a qualified expert on food sanitation issues related to contamination. Now, that makes perfect sense, but when you convert that to a must, you're going to increase the cost of doing things that you're used to doing. Now, you might not have someone on staff who has a particular education or a particular experience that FDA finds to be satisfactory, and that could be a problem. So you're going to have to start thinking about how you build that into your own process. This qualified individual piece is going to affect seafood companies as well as companies that would ordinarily be under HARP-C or the standards for produce safety. So that's pretty important for you to see. The last thing I wanted to talk about here, and I mentioned this in the other in some of the other videos, and you'll find this on our blog. And this is particularly true for foreign growers and harvesters and co-ops. Now, one of the big questions is, if I'm in the food business, am I under HARP-C or am I under the standards for produce safety? And FDA tries to sort of create these categories that tells you which one you fall into. A lot of farming operations, though, are relatively small, and consequently their food goes into these co-ops. those co-ops are almost certainly going to fall under Harp C and not under standards for produce safety. And that might be a surprise to those co-ops because they might have been expecting to fall under sort of the traditional USDA good agricultural practices provisions, the way FDA has ordinarily handled it, but that's going to probably change. So if you're in a farming operation and you're going into a co-op, or you are a co-op, you need to pay attention to the Harp C regulations as well. And the only last thing I want to say is FDA issued a warning letter the same day they issued their proposed regulations. And that warning letter went to a farming operation. We mentioned it on our blog. We mentioned it in other videos. You should look at that warning letter and what we say about it. Because there you will see FDA taking the standards for produce safety and actually starting to implement them in a warning letter on an inspection on a farm where there was which was associated with a salmonella outbreak in 2012. So you'll see FDA actually moving on these regulations. So these are things I wanted importers and foreign suppliers to think about, because when those foreign supplier verification procedures come out, FDA is going to expect you to know how to do this and to be able to think through together your relationship to be able to implement these requirements. Again, I'm Ben England with FDAimports.com, and thank you for watching.